The government is likely to propose a new law to replace the current law governing special economic zones.
The new act will enable the states to become partners in development of enterprise and service hubs. The new legislation will cover all large and existing and new industrial enclaves to optimally utilize available infrastructure. The focus would be on enhancing competitiveness of Indian exports.
Hello everyone. The first special economic zone in Asia was set up in India in 1965, whereas China entered into this SEZ game in the late 1970s or early 1980s. Guys, still China raced way ahead of India. And after that, India launched the SEZ Act in 2005 with an intent to boost the special economic zones. But it still didn't take off the way it should have been. Consequently, India's dream of becoming the manufacturing and export powerhouse also shattered. And actually there are plenty of reasons behind it. But the interesting point is, Government of India is tweaking this SEZ Act and is bringing up the DESH bill, that is, Development of Enterprises and Services Hub. But an even more interesting question on the table is, will this new bill, if implemented, be able to do what Indian special economic zones couldn't? Or is it just the same old chocolate in a new wrapper? So guys, in this video, we are going to discuss what exactly are special economic zones and how it impacted the Chinese economy. Also, why Indian SEZs failed, and finally, what the government of India is trying to achieve with this DESH bill. And most importantly, what are the issues in this bill which will make it an ultimate failure. So guys, let's take it from the top. In 2005, the GDP of India was around $745 billion and China's GDP was around $2 trillion, a bit more than the double. And when in 2014, Indian GDP touched 2 trillion mark, Chinese GDP till then jumped 5 folds and was standing at $10 trillion. Ladies and gentlemen, this humongous growth can majorly be attributed to the success of Chinese SEZs or special economic zones, which made China the manufacturing hub. Now, if I explain what SEZ is in just one sentence, then it is an area inside the national borders of a country which is set up to promote business, trade and manufacturing, where the trade and business laws are quite different from the rest of the country and a bit more relaxed. Also, the business units out there get a ton of benefits including tax exemption, duty-free exports and many more. And guys, just to give you an idea of how an SEZ can impact the economic growth of a country, in the case of China, SEZ have contributed to around 22% of the Chinese GDP, 60% of exports, and not just that, special economic zones are also estimated to have created over 3 crore jobs in China. But what went wrong with the Indian special economic zones? Why did businesses moved out of it, and what is the government of India's new bill trying to achieve? So guys, before moving over to the government's new plan, let's first understand why special economic zones didn't work out in India. And to understand this, let's go back to the late 1970s China and try to analyze its economic history to understand what actually China did differently that it raced so much ahead of India. So following the death of Chairman Mao, Deng Xiaoping came to power in China. And in 1977, Xiaoping, in order to rejuvenate the Chinese economy, launched a program called 4 Modernizations. The main purpose of this was to strengthen the 4 sectors of China, namely agriculture, industry, defense and technology. And as a part of these 4 modernization, Deng Xiaoping launched Chinese SEZ program. Guys, this was the turning point and this is what made China an economic power. And as a part of this SEZ program, China set up special economic zones in majorly 4 locations: Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Santao and Xiamen. And guys, the main reason for the huge success of these Chinese SEZs are location, area and infrastructure. We'll talk about all of these one by one. So starting with area, Shenzhen was spread across 2,000 square kilometers, whereas if you see Hainan, it is spread across 34,000 square kilometers. On the other hand, if you take a look at the Indian SEZs, they are quite small as compared to these Chinese behemoths. On an average, an Indian SEZ is just of 1 square kilometer. Just think of the difference. And if you ask how does that matter, guys, it's directly linked to the infrastructure. To set up a high-class manufacturing hub, the infrastructure has to be high-class as well. But in the case of Indian SEZ, they are quite smaller and consequently they didn't have proper facilities. Now coming to the location selection. China chose mostly port regions and preferred locations close to Hong Kong. Also, if you see the first SEZ of India, that is Kandla Export Processing Zone, even though it was located in the port region, a big problem was that it was a closed enclave. That is, it was just limited to export-oriented production. Whereas if you see the Chinese counterparts like Shenzhen and others, you'll see that the Chinese government intended to build not just a closed enclave production zones, but actually mega cities. And throughout the 1980s and 1990s, China focused on executing this concept stage-wise and very strategically. Guys, if you observe, as a part of stage 1, special economic zones were set up. And after setting up the SEZs, they built large industrial areas and cities around those places as a part of the next stage. And after the success of these, in late 1990s, high-tech zones were set up in some selected regions of some mega complexes in order to strengthen the research and development. You can call it stage 3. And up till this stage, China got the proof of concept, and thus the stage 4 was massive expansion. That is, after the success of this model, it was replicated or spilled over to the other parts of the country as well. And later on in stage 5, they set up national tourism and holiday resorts in order to boost the tourism of those regions. Thus with this, China actually didn't leave any stone unturned to make its SEZ successful. India started EPZs before China but couldn't scale it the way China did. And finally, after this astounding success of China, India decided to give a boost to its SEZ in the year 2000 and transformed it from an industrial cluster type EPZs to larger SEZs. As a result of this, India passed the SEZ Act of 2005 and launched many incentives, like the companies will get 100% tax exemption on all the revenues earned from the export for 5 years and 50% for the next 5 years. Now, another interesting twist on that was, if the companies reinvest the money into upgrading machinery and stuff, they would again get a tax exemption. Now, this sounds lucrative, right? And it actually worked well in favor of India. If I back this by numbers, India actually had around 19 SEZs back then in 2005, whose count jumped to 250 today. And as per the report of Business Standard, the export from SEZs increased from 22,000 crores to 7 lakh crore. It's indeed a big leap, but honestly nowhere close to China. While another big problem was, the World Trade Organization objected to these incentives of India. As per WTO, nations are not allowed to subsidize exports as it distorts the market prices and kills the competition. Due to which, India had to make a few changes in the SEZ Act. India brought in many clauses like sunset clause, withdrawal of tax benefits, etc. And this lack of consistency in the policies, along with infrastructural and location issues, were not very well digested by the businesses. Moreover, many countries like Vietnam were relaxing their regulatory laws to lure the businesses. Consequently, many businesses moved out of Indian SEZs to other countries. Also guys, India lost not just in terms of location and area or even policies, but it also lost due to the selfish motives of some politicians and leaders. As per a research, the location of many SEZs were chosen not on the basis of economic potential, but were chosen to benefit the corrupt politicians. You can find the link to the PDF of the research paper in the description. Now guys, why was this concerning? Because due to this corruption, the development didn't spill over to its neighboring locations of the SEZs, which means the entire motive of development somewhat failed. So because of all such economic and political factors, Indian SEZ didn't blow up to the level it should. But now what? Guys, as I have mentioned in the beginning of the video, that the government of India is working on a plan named DESH Bill, or Development of Enterprises and Services Hub, to improve the situation of the special economic zones. If I had to sum up the entire bill in just 3 points, it would be: first, as I have mentioned earlier, there are many objections which WTO have put into the SEZ Act. Thus, DESH Bill is WTO compliant. Second, in order to boost domestic manufacturing, the government through its DESH Bill is planning to give tax benefit to those companies as well who are manufacturing just for domestic needs, provided they set up their businesses in their development hubs. And let me tell you guys, this might create a huge mess and is one of the major issues in the bill. We'll discuss it in some time, but before that, let's move over to the third point. The DESH Bill has 2 parts, enterprises and services, right? So not just manufacturing, the government is trying to boost the services industry as well. Because if you take a look at the data of the existing SEZs in India, we'll find that around 61% of the SEZs are in IT or IT-enabled services sector. Also, India is known for its IT and services in the entire world. Thus, government wants to capitalize the service industry in not just IT, but logistics, supply chain, etc. to its full potential. Also, since there is such a high concentration in this IT and IT-enabled services sector, the government is trying to boost the production in other sectors as well, and is planning to include the companies who are manufacturing for domestic needs. Now, the major problem with this bill is the idea of domestic manufacturing. And since in this new DESH Bill there is no export obligation, thus even the business units in the domestic tariff area, that is area outside of SEZ, might relocate or declare themselves SEZs or hubs, ultimately getting the benefit. This will rather impact the revenues and taxes of the country. Even the revenue department has raised serious objection to this. So guys, these are all the points which I have regarding this new DESH Bill and the failure of SEZ. Now what do you think? will this DESH bill be passed in the parliament, and will this change the manufacturing and export landscape of India? Or is this the same old chocolate in a new wrapper? Currently, I think it's quite hard to predict if this will make India the export or manufacturing powerhouse in future, as the government departments themselves are quite confused with this. But it would be really interesting to see how it spans out in coming times. And honestly, bills come and go, but the most important question is, will the government of India understand its mistake and the problems which Indian SEZ faced, and will they correct its mistake? Well, we can just wait and watch, but can't really do anything. But right now what you can do is, like the video if you found it insightful, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel for more such content related to business and economy.